Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all participants. It looks like it is actually one of the most popular event we are doing during this pandemic. And, there's so much changed over the last 2, 3 months. Many of our small businesses shut their door and went home, and they were struggling. And we always mention this in Portland County, and we believe and we support our small businesses. They are the one paying taxes. They are the one hiring people, and always all over the United States, we all know that small businesses are the backbone of our society. And in Fort Bend County, there is nothing different, and we believe in our small businesses, and that is when we started talking about the CARE Act, and we got a share of that, and so we wanted to make sure we are caring for our small businesses so that they can get back and open their door and maybe hire people and contribute to make our community continue to be a better community in Fort Bend County. And with that, as you all know that, and we had a committee put together with the help of our chambers, Fort Bend Chamber, Fort Bend Central Chamber, and EDC, and numerous stakeholders in the community. And I have to really, one person I'm going to recognize is Ed, our auditor. He is working with, I don't know how many people, how many programs he's working on at the same time. Thank you for all the hard work, Ed. And there is so many people need to be recognized, but I'm not going to get in there because there are right people to do that. But at the same time, I just wanted to contribute. I just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work. With that, we came and we are allocated $22 million to help our small businesses. And those who are listening to me, I just want you to know that the first phase of application is going to be starting. And so I just want to see an overwhelming participation, overwhelming need, where we are in the process of looking into even adding maybe another somewhere in the vicinity of around $12 million above and beyond this 22 million. So that means there are more money coming, and please go ahead and apply. Please spread the word. And obviously our chambers, our other community, other stakeholders, and Fort Bend County, our office, we all are pushing this message out and make sure it gets to the right people, and we make the right priority when it comes to supporting our businesses so that we all can get back to business, get back to normal life. And Fort Bend County is open. And during COVID also, I just wanted to mention, those people are listening, we are, you may look our numbers going up, but that is happened for a reason. We are testing more people. And we are per capita, Fort Bend County is one of the top. I mean, we are number one in the state of Texas. We are doing everything possible to combat the situation. And this is actually another example of that. So I continue to appreciate our citizens, during this stay-at-home order. You all, behaved responsibly, and that's one of the reasons why we are doing good, and everything is looking okay, but it is a moving target. Every single day things are changing, and so stay tuned. And with that, I will pass it on to you, Chris.
Okay. Thank you, Judge George. Make sure I am. Thank you, Judge George, again for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you for taking the time today to participate in this event. My name is Christopher Breaux. I'm the Division Chair of the Fort Bend Chamber's Government Division. The Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program was created with input from developed in coordination and in conjunction with the local economic development and chamber organizations in Fort Bend County. After consultation with many business owners, this generous support by the Fort Bend Economic Development Council was very helpful. On May 22nd, during the Fort Bend EDC Small Business Grant Program Subcommittee meeting, the chambers were tasked with preparing a proposal for grant and or a loan program to present to that group for consideration. The proposal needed to be completed for presentation on Friday morning, 2.5 days later. Through all this crisis, all of the chambers have been talking to our membership daily, conducting surveys, and moving forward as advocates of business. The chambers represent both the rural and urban areas of our county. They represent a broad and diverse community of businesses from all sizes, from mom and pop to the Floors and the Frito-Lays. They found a great deal of common in the collaboration. They all have members who have been left behind from benefiting from the CARES Act for multiple reasons. They all have members who have rent to pay with no income or little or no reserves. They all heard directly from the smallest and micro businesses in our community. Although they agreed they'd like to help all the businesses in need, we wanted first to serve the underserved and most vulnerable. This program can help over 2,200 businesses as it is presented today. Throughout the process and guidance, again, the Fort Bend County Auditor, Mr. Ed Sturdivant, and Fort Bend County Consultant, Mr. Spurgeon Robinson, have been there to ensure that the plan was in compliance with the CARES Act, which is very important. The Chamber proposal was discussed on Friday 29th with the larger business subcommittee, and their input was incorporated into the plan. At yesterday's Commissioner Court, the plan was approved and presented and will be launched on June 15th. Today, we'll provide you more detail in regards to that plan. I'd like to tell everyone in the audience about the chat feature. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in at the bottom of your screen in the chat dialog box, and we'll address those questions after or during the presentation as it deems appropriate. This time, I have the privilege to introduce our speakers, Spurgeon Robinson, founder and president and CEO of Impact Strategy Consultants, LLC, and Ed Sturdivant, the auditor for Fort Bend County. Spurgeon Robinson leads one of the fast grossest consulting and advisory services firms and is considered an innovator and as a leader in program management, strategy, compliance, and emergency management. He has broad and diverse experience across multiple industries in both public and private sector. He specializes in helping folks in this area through bold and innovative ideas and implementation. He thrives on figuring out what not only is possible, but was achievable. Mr. Robinson leads a team of impact and embraces their clients' toughest challenges and delivers solutions that lead to impactful results. Ed Sturdivant is a licensed CPA with an emphasis in governmental accounting. He was the assistant county auditor in Tom Green County from June 1995 to August 1997, and was then appointed our county auditor in Fort Bend County, September of 1997. He served in that capacity through July to that capacity. Sorry, that was in Tom Green County. Sorry, Ed, for messing this up. But he came to Fort Bend County August in 2000, currently serving that capacity. His civic participation includes 7 years as a board member Behind the Badge charity and currently serving as the treasurer of that organization for the second year. Ed has done a whole lot with this CARES Act. He's been a moving force in it, and we appreciate both him and Mr. Robinson joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys for the presentation.
All right, thank you, Chris. I'm going to lead off the presentation with the PowerPoint that Ryan is going to drive for us. And just to reinforce to everyone on this meeting that we have a lot to still accomplish, and having your involvement with this next stage of assistance that the county is moving forward with is greatly appreciated. So with that, I will let Ryan move us to the next slide. And this is just introducing the PowerPoint. This is what we've titled the program, and this is our branding, so to speak. Next. All right, so as we've seen the chat, a lot of questions are coming through. This PowerPoint will share with you what those criteria are in relation to what the Commissioners Court adopted yesterday at the meeting at 1 o'clock. So just starting off with program criteria and eligibility, we have the cap currently at $10,000 and the grant amount is a fixed amount. It's not going to be graduated in this first stage. So $10,000 for all eligible businesses applying for this program will receive $10,000 on a first come, first served basis. We had to narrow the scope because we do only have $22 million available in this first round. And therefore, we had to develop and design the program to target the most vulnerable businesses. And not all expenses are covered. However, this does provide immediate financial assistance. And over on the right, these are the important things that you need to focus on. We open the application up June 15th, Monday morning, 8 a.m. So for all of you on this call and for those who may follow up and review this presentation, have your documentation ready for the kickoff Monday morning. The county is ready for that volume. We've already proved that we can accommodate the volume with another program that we rolled out earlier this month. So please be ready, follow the guidelines in this document. We're going to leave it open until we exhaust the funds. The applications are going to be available on the main Fort Bend County webpage, and there will be kind of a rolling screen for the other priorities. This will be one of 3 priorities on the main screen, the main splash page of Fort Bend County. So please hang on to this website, and that's where you will go Monday morning at 8 a.m. and just look for the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program page, click, and start applying. And we do have an email address that you can use to have follow-up questions addressed. We don't have a phone number. However, if you email that address, someone will get back with you if a call is necessary. So please don't be concerned. Next slide. Okay, we have the first stage of this application process for the first 2 weeks, the 15th through the 26th. We are targeting those who have not already been awarded support from the programs that are shown here. And Spurgeon will talk about them in a little more detail in the documentation criteria section of this slide presentation. However, just to reinforce to all of you who may have already enjoyed support from these programs, you need to be ready for the next phase. It's, as you heard from the judge, we expect to have an additional allocation, and that could come as early as the court meeting on June 23rd. So as a result of the applications during the first week, starting the 15th, I will be presenting to the court that activity. And if we exhaust the funds in the first week, then I will be presenting to the court that we need to move to our next funding level, as well as our next phase, possibly earlier than what's presented here. Again, the applications are on a first come, first served basis. So be ready for Monday morning, 8 a.m. And we need you to have the application submitted by an authorized individual from the entity. Next slide. Okay, so the principal office has to be in Fort Bend County. We have our bracketed eligibility criteria for this first phase at 100,000 in gross revenue up to 2 million. And again, back to the comment I made on the previous slide, if you do not fall within this range, please have your information ready for the next application phase when the Commissioner's Court adds additional funding to expand the eligibility for other businesses who didn't meet the criteria in the first phase. Also, you need to have at least one employee that is reported on a W-2 and no more than 20 reported, and that's FTEs, full-time equivalents, that are reported on W-2s and 1099s. Must be a for-profit business in Fort Bend County. The business has to be substantially impacted by COVID-19 as of February 15th. And as of February 15th, has not permanently closed. Obviously, our hope is to stimulate and promote the expansion and improvement of the businesses who've been impacted. We're sorry for the ones who weren't able to endure, but we want to provide support to the ones who are continuing to try to stay open and get back to where they were. Let's see, March through May. So the comparative information for revenue will be for the period of March through May of 19 compared to March through May of 2020. There will be circumstances where some may not have had revenue if you opened up after May of 2019. For those that have that as a circumstance, we're encouraging you to use the immediate 3 months prior to March of 2020 as comparative data, and our case management team will work with you on your eligibility. Next slide. So these are the eligible CARES Act activities that the funds are to be used for. And I'm not going to read them all to you. They're easy to understand, very self-explanatory, and target your use of the funds for these purposes. The reason why it's important that you know this at the beginning of receipt of your grant award is that in the coming months, within 3 months, we will be coming back to you for you to provide us support on how you use the funds. Those are likely to be invoices, receipts. They could be letters of receipt from another entity, and I'm talking about with your leasing agents, property management companies, whatever you can do to provide us documentation to support the use of the payment for your business. And these are expenses incurred as of April 3rd, which was the day of the stay-at-home order, which we all as county government realized that that was the main reason for the majority of your impact to your business. And also that these expenses have not already been reimbursed through any other program. Next slide. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Spurgeon for the documentation.
All right, good morning, everybody, and I'll continue on with the presentation here. So we're looking for certain documentation that you need to be prepared to provide that would be part of the application process that starts on June 15th. So this is going to go through an example of what information that's going to be requested on the form online. Some of this, of course, is very self-explanatory, but I'll go through it. Obviously, the name, as Ed mentioned, very important that the person that's authorized or authorized signer of the business needs to be the one going through this documentation, because we're going to require that person to certify this information. So very important that there's someone who is going to be the authorized signer of the business completes this information. The business name, obviously, DBA. If there is a DBA associated with your business, please list that as well. The other things are pretty much self-explanatory that we need is basic demographic and contact information. Your tax ID number is very important. If you're sole proprietor, we understand you may be using a social security number. We have a way to separately make sure you identify that so that that's also encrypted or protected as well. One of the things that we're saying, there will be a number of businesses that may have multiple locations. We understand that. We encourage you to not only apply, but you should probably focus on the business that has the most employees and the one with the largest number of revenues for the initial application. But each entity that has a tax ID number should be submitted separately, just to make sure that's clarified. All right, next slide. Once again, continue with business information. We're going to look for the year established to make sure you're in business prior to the pandemic, COVID-19. Entity types, those are pretty much self-explanatory. And we also want to understand the number of employees that you have as of March 31st, 2020, both understanding both full-time W-2 employees and part-time W-2 employees, as well as 1099 contractors that you may have as well. Next slide. Okay, and it's also, we want to collect some more different demographic information. So if your business is certified or can be verified as a minority-owned business, woman-owned business, disabled or veteran-owned business, we want to know that as well. So there'll be indicators there for such. Your NAICS code, not every business understands what may have a NAICS code or a primary one. If you know it, we want you to enter that information as well. That helps us classify the number and the types of industries that are impacted in Fort Bend County for reference as well. And then, of course, there'll be a more detailed description of the type of industry that you're in. So make sure that you also identify that. Once again, this helps us with understanding what has been the impact of certain industry sectors within Fort Bend County and the types of businesses that have been impacted as well, and see what variances are. That's very important information for us to have as well. Next slide. Okay. There's also things that we're going to need to know just to make sure that the business is not only viable, but also that the business is in good standing. We are going to ask questions around, is there any pending litigation, financial risk that impact the companies to operate? Those things are very important, whether they occurred prior to the incident versus after as well. So those are things at least let us disclose. It's not a de facto disqualifier, but it's something that we have to ask as we're dealing with both federal funds. We also want to understand whether you're deemed an essential business, as we know that may have either forced you to stay open, or not say forced, but you may have remained operational during that period because you're an essential business or not. And then at what capacity did you remain open? Were you fully operate, or were you reduced by some percentage? So if you can also provide that information as to what capacity you were able to remain open as well.
Hey, Spurgeon, this is Ed.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little staticky. Is there?
Oh, I am?
Yeah.
All right. Am I a little bit better now, hopefully?
That's better. I think being
better.
I'm sorry, yes. You should have stopped earlier, Chris.
Radio voice
all
on.
Right. Great. So, all right. So just going back through this slide here, this is information we want to know whether or not the business has any potential financial risk that would impact being awarded a grant. We don't think this will be a non-starter. We just want to make sure we're disclosing proper information as we're dealing with federal funds. And then we want to understand what the impact of COVID-19 has been to their business. One, if you're deemed an essential business, we would like to know that, and would have impacted your ability to stay open or not, and if you were able to remain open as well. And then we want to know what capacity that you were able to remain open. So whether it's very small or not at all, at less than 25%, all the way up to if you were fully in some way open and operational, you still may not have full capacity of customers. We want to know what capacity, if you were able to remain open, that you're at. So that's information that'll be good for us to continue to have as we evolve. Next slide.
Hey, Spurgeon, we're still getting some static.
Really? Is it?
I can take over if.
Yeah, if I'm staticky, why don't you? I think you can read through the rest of the slides if that makes it easier for everybody.
No problem.
With my Wi-Fi here, but go ahead.
Spurgeon, whenever he says you're staticky, you clear right up.
Well, I'll pick up from here, and
go ahead, Ed.
If I mess anything up, Spurgeon, please chime in.
No problem.
Okay, so obviously we want to get your revenues for the two time frames that are shown here. If by chance you do not have revenue for that first range for comparative purposes, we're asking you to provide the 3 months immediately prior to March of 2020. And again, our case management team will work directly with you if we have questions about that. So the first round, we are asking you to confirm whether you have applied for financial assistance from these other programs and any other state or local assistance program that may have been provided at the local level or state level. So as you read this, you may determine, well, what's preventing me from applying if you're asking me to confirm that I've received financial assistance, if you're saying that I'm not included in the first round if I have. If you apply and you have received these benefits, we do need you to confirm that. It will mean that your application will be set aside, not deleted. It will be set aside for further review. And if we do not exhaust the funds in the first round with our most vulnerable business category, then we will be looking to these applicants as well. So we're not saying you cannot apply. We're just saying that you are not eligible in the first round if we exhaust the limit of the funds with those most vulnerable businesses that we've identified.
And Ed, I want to add to that. This is also important for us to do as part of our due diligence for a duplication of benefit check. And so we have to also make sure that we're checking that as part of this process as well.
And obviously, we have those who may have applied and have not enjoyed benefit yet. Very important that you convey this information through the application process. And that'll be clearer as we get through this part of the slideshow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Ed, can I jump in here? When we're saying, have you applied for other financial assistance, do you mean have they applied and received other financial assistance? What if they were denied?
Applied and denied, applied and received. We're asking for the most transparent information as possible so that we can focus on the first target group, which is the 100,000 to 2 million that have not received assistance. And for those who are checking these boxes when they apply, we will need you to say that you did apply and were denied. If you applied and were awarded, even though you're not eligible for funding in the first round based on the criteria that's established here, you will not be discharged or your application will not be deleted. It will simply be set aside for consideration in the next phase.
Thanks, Ed.
Total transparency. Next slide. All right, so business risk. These are the questions that may be asked and you need to be prepared to answer, which is why it's so important that we get to the responsible person in the entity, with the entity, so that they can disseminate this information to those who may need to reply through that person. So debarred or suspended, denied a license to permit or permit to operate as a business, or revoked by government, is an applicant or owner currently indicted. I mean, obviously, these are answers to questions we're expecting the applicants to say no. However, you need to be truthful because we will be going through a process with an underwriter that will confirm your answers. So these are just affirmations of the fact that you have not encountered these circumstances. Next slide. Okay, this is the part that you need to be thinking free form as far as the description of how the grant will be used. You can put this on your business's letterhead. You can just a form letter, a memo, but we need you to provide a description of how the grant would be used and how COVID-19 has impacted your operations. We also need you to certify in that document or a separate document, depending on your preference, how the funds will be used or that they will be used for the approved purposes that were illustrated earlier in this slide presentation. We also need you to authorize the county to pursue a FICO report from your company. We will need a copy of a driver's license or a state-issued ID card and agreement to electronically sign. You can put all of this information in a single document. We just need these assertions or these descriptions well laid out in the document. Obviously, the driver's license or ID card will be an image, but we do need you to provide this input in your format, a Word document, a PDF, that you will upload to the application page.
And then some of these things will be actually asked in the application portal, and allow it to be uploaded into the actual system as well. So there'll be a combination of both.
Excellent. Next slide. All right. So additional program information. We expect the business to remain in operation. We need your affirmation that you expect your business to remain in operation for at least 1 year or through the end of this calendar year. The basis for the end of the calendar year is that's the limit of the use of the CARES Act the CARES Act local government assistance funding that this allocation is being made from. I mentioned earlier that receipts and documentation will be required within 3 months after the grant distribution, and we'll follow up with you on those required documents as we move forward after you've been awarded the grant. And the funds dispersed that do not have approved or proper documentation will be required to be reimbursed to the county so that they can be distributed to other grant recipients or other grant applicants. Next slide.
I think that's it.
That was it. All right. So to that last bullet, the required uses of the funds are documented at the beginning of this slide presentation. Obviously, that'll be made available to everyone with this presentation. So, and also any follow-up questions that may be necessary, that email address that's at the beginning of the slide presentation can also be used for those follow-up questions. We're prepared to respond to those as they come in.
Ryan, can we jump back to the presentation, to the eligible cost? And that's on slide 5.
Slide 5.
Well, Ed and Spurgeon, as we're trying to get back to that, let me ask a couple of questions that have come aboard. So, we talk about 1 to 20 employees, and the CARE Act and all of this seems to be very unique, and not necessarily W-2 employees, but W-2 and 1099 employees. With that, where does a sole proprietor fit in who might not receive a W-2, might just have a 1099 or a Schedule C type?
If that is a circumstance, we would encourage that sole proprietor to apply and specifically convey the information that is the circumstance of their business. And we're using a W-2 employee as a definition, but if a sole proprietor is the only employee in the business, then we will evaluate that. However, it is our target to address the employers that have employees between 1 and 20 FTEs. And as you know, some businesses use part-time employees. So to properly define full-time equivalents, if you had 40 employees working 20 hours a week, that's the equivalent of 20 FTEs, just for everybody's benefit. Okay. And we would expect you to use your 1099 contract employees as within that criteria as well, because if you're eligible to pay them as independent contractors, they're obviously supporting your business in an independent contractor role. However, they're working for your company, your business. So again, back to my comment, full transparency. If there's any uncertainty, you can ask a question at the beginning or simply apply and properly explain your situation.
Right.
Absolutely. And just to confirm, this is for profit only, this not for nonprofits.
Correct.
We're going to have this program up, and so these slides will be available on the Chamber website, as well as this program will be out there, so you can go back and look. One of the questions that have come across, if I didn't have revenues within this time frame of 2019, what are my comparatives?
You're going to use the most recent 3 months prior to March of 2020 for comparative purposes.
Okay.
And again, that's why we have a case management team that will be looking at this. So there will be no categorical denials. The best thing you can do is be as informational as you can with your submission. And if there is insufficient information or lack of clarity, the case management team will reach back out to you with the contact information you provide.
And that's important to note. So you do have case managers, so it's not you fill out this application online and it rejects you. There'll be people there to walk you through it, talk you through it.
Spurgeon, you want to speak to that?
Right. There's no rejection of the application online, so it's good you submit your information. We just want you to be truthful and in the submission of it, and as clear and as transparent as possible. We do have case managers that will be available will be looking through the documentation, verifying information, and following up. So if there is a question, they will reach back out to the business owner.
And so our numbers here are looking for revenues between 100,000 and 2 million. If you started at the beginning of the year, and I'm not asking you to prejudge or tell me how this application will work, but the caseworker is going to look at that and see. You may not have a year's worth of history that gets you over 100,000, but there's an indication that it's there. Maybe I'm saying that wrong.
Yeah, somewhat of an extrapolation of revenue depending on what their current burn rate would be. That would be evaluated. Yes, that's how we're going to try to get to understanding how large of size the business is or would have been.
Okay.
Is that right, Ed? I want to make sure that's.
No, that's exactly correct. And it's going to be a simple extrapolation so that no one has to worry about smoke and mirrors with this process. Again, transparency on your part needs to be equaled with transparency on our part.
Ed, let me just make one statement on behalf of all the businesses and the questions that are being answered or asked below. There's a lot of questions I see popping up about, and Kristen and Carrie and others have tried to answer them as they've come in, but we want to encourage every business in Fort Bend County to apply for the PPP program with the SBA if you haven't done that already. And I'll get around to talking about the grant program in a minute, but there's still $147 billion. The last time I checked with the Houston director, it's not moving fast anymore. Those that needed it and qualified for it in the first round and a portion of the second round have generally got it already. For those businesses that have not applied for it, you should. If you have had substantial impact to your business, you need to do that. It provides you 2 months of coverage on your labor force if you keep your labor force intact. So please do that, number one. Number two, this grant program is not necessarily going to restrict you if you have applied or received any of those funds. The point of this is to set aside those applications for the moment and give relief to those that have had no relief But we fully suspect and think that based on yesterday's Commissioner's Court process, that there will be additional funds added to this program. And you should apply, even if you've received an EIDL grant or an EIDL loan or a PPP, you should apply. Those applications in the process with Spurgeon and Ed will be set aside for the moment, but they will be in and registered so that when additional funding becomes available, you too will be eligible to do it, and you'll have your application in. I would also say that leading up to this grant program, in the discussions, even in Commissioner's Court, but among those associations that represent small business in Fort Bend County, the limitations that have been identified, the 100,000 to 2 million have been discussed. The FTEs have been discussed. I would, if you're $90,000 or you're $2.5 million or $3 million, I would go ahead and enter your application too. Again, it's going to be set aside initially because that's not part of the eligibility, but those applications will be considered. And when you look at it, we're really trying to gauge how much interest and application there is in this program. The $22 million should help roughly 2,200 businesses. We know that there's 10 to 15,000 businesses that are active in Fort Bend County. So we know this is going to get oversubscribed, but I would use your time, even if you don't qualify initially eligibility wise, to submit your application. It'll give us a good benchmark for folks to go back to Commissioner's Court and say, we're overwhelmed with these things. We've got a lot of businesses that need assistance and help. And it'll make our case as the business community representatives to go back to Commissioner's Court as funds become available to reallocate to make this the priority. I'll quit there.
Well,
Ed, could you, there's a couple of questions on multiple location businesses. Could you cover that real quick? You or Sturgeon, please.
Spurgeon, I'm going to let you cover the multiple locations, right, single business.
Okay. So the easiest or most simplified way to address that, if you have a business that is located in Fort Bend County and has a separate EIN for that business, we encourage you to apply for that business. If your business, if the multiple locations sit under one EIN, those should be identified. So full transparency that you should be able to let us know how many locations you have under a single EIN, if that's the case. If you have multiple EINs for different locations, submit them separately. We encourage, if you do, choose the larger one. If you have to actually pick which one, choose the larger one so you can maximize the funds. But the most important barometer is if each location has a separate EIN, apply separately to the program for those. We will look at that as well because, once again, we want to expand this to as many businesses as possible. And we don't want to have one entity get most of the funds while we don't have the opportunity for those who wouldn't have at least one single location get funds. So we'll handle it on a case-by-case basis. But to kind of try the most simple way to answer your question, we'll apply to the program, use your EIN as the driver of which our location is eligible. And if there's multiple locations under one EIN, combine those, and then we'll do the sorting afterwards on the back end of the process.
And use your narrative to tell your story. If you don't have a box or a radio button that you check in the application, use the uploaded narrative to tell your story, and a case manager will review.
Again, and it's so important, there is no immediate rejection online saying, that's out. There will be a case, there will be human eyes on this looking at it. So if you don't feel like you fit the exact criteria, apply, and they'll take a look at it. That's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Hey guys, when you say a cost of inventory, what does that mean?
Cost of goods, the materials that go into the operation of your business, if those result in items of sale. So cost of inventory that you distribute by sale to the public.
Right.
So if you bought inventory in this, you bought cost of goods, you bought inventory in this process, that's you can use this grant to pay for that.
Yes, whatever it takes to get those goods in the for sale status.
Right.
Okay.
For instance, if a restaurant had to waste its inventory because it lost its opportunity to use its food that it had pre-purchased, and it had to resupply as part of this process, that would qualify. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes, my understanding. So the resupply is the key point would qualify for that. Yes, and with reasonable too. But yes, the resupply would actually qualify. And it's important to note while we're on that subject, construction costs, new build outs, capital equipment. I mean, those things will not, capital expenses, I should say, would not qualify, just to make sure that's clear as well.
However, if you've employed measures for social distancing in your establishment, you should be prepared to present those expenses as eligible, and they'll be reviewed.
But improvements, for instance, to isolate booths with plastic protective gear between booths, or all of that is personal protective equipment, right? For purposes of this. I've been in restaurants, for instance, where they have each hung between their booths from the ceiling to the top of the booth, a plastic, actually sheet of plastic, and every booth is separated that way. That took a lot of expense and time. So all of that labor expense and cost associated with that, it actually may exhaust the entire grant, but those would qualify, right?
Yeah. So items those are called reopening expenses, and those are for social distancing as well. So those things that you have to put in place, the plexiglass, for example, the signage on the floor to understand what social distancing 6 feet is, et cetera, those things will qualify. We're just talking about full out build outs and things of that nature. Plus, it wouldn't be enough money to support that anyway. But those things are reasonable for you to reopen, social distancing, and apply and make sure that you're in protective gear or restructuring to make sure that people are safe and within 6 feet and things of that nature. Those things are all applicable and would be okay to submit.
A great example of ineligibility would be if you expanded the size of your business by renting additional space adjacent. If you did that and then did build out of that new area, that would not be eligible. That is a major capital cost that, although your method may be to accomplish social distancing by creating more space, that's not what would be categorized as PPE or eligible social distancing expenditures.
That's just not part of this deal.
Correct.
I think the other thing that's important to note, much like the PPP program at the beginning, is that you have to have shown a loss in revenue here. That is not going to change out of this process, most likely, as the program considers other modifications. The reason is some people have done quite well under this process. I'm not going to say that it hadn't hurt most of it, but there's others that have done quite well in the process, and that's not what this is intended to do. It's not a grant for people that have basically stayed afloat and done better at or better than what they did in previous years. This is really intended to help the people that are struggling. And with that in mind, please don't apply if your revenue streams are equal to or what they were last year. There's no sense. That doesn't make any sense. This is for folks that are really impacted by the program.
And yes, I'd like to, Chris, if I could just reiterate what Mr. Wiley said earlier. For those businesses that have not applied for the PPP, really encourage you to do that. There is money still available out there. There are banks listed on the SBA website. My understanding, they are still accepting applications. So if you have not applied for the PPP, please do so. That's a very valuable resource for you and gives you a lot of value there. So I want to reiterate what he said earlier about applying for the PPP. If you have been denied, reapply if you can. That's a very important tool for you. But I want to stress that those loans are still available.
And Spurgeon, to that end, I would also say that there's a lot of people that bank with the big banks, the very largest of banks in the country, the national banks. They aren't the most proficient, quite honestly, no disrespect to them, but they aren't the most proficient of handling local businesses. Go to your community banks. Even if you don't have a relationship with them now, it may be a opportunity to build a relationship with them in the future. And they are the best prepared. They process the most of these PPP applications in the beginning. They ramped up, their backlog is now resolved, and they're ready to go. So use your local banks. When you think about local banks, the ones that aren't national necessarily, but right here, even your credit unions have the capability of responding to this, and they're best prepared to help you and get through the process as expeditiously as possible.
Jeff, if I can say, if you need help with that, contact your local chamber and we'd be glad to provide you with lists of the banks in the area.
Thank you. And for the applicants or the soon-to-be applicants on this webinar, if you haven't done as you've heard you're encouraged to do now, the case managers will also be encouraging this as they reach back out to you if your assertion is that you have not applied. So don't be surprised if you're encouraged again.
Hey guys, talk about the time period for the use of these funds. What time period are we reimbursing?
The time period is for the first 3 months of the pandemic. And although it doesn't prevent them from incurring expenditures after the first 3 months, we are trying to target this first group of months that we have just experienced or are about to finish experiencing as our first shot.
Okay.
The limit of the use, although we're asking, once the grant award is provided, we're asking for documentation within 3 months. The limit of the use of the funds is the end of the calendar year. So even if there was information that the applicant could share that says, I've still got these things going, we're still trying to get reopened, we have utilities coming up, the remote working, leases, whatever the case may be, as long as they're able to provide information that supports that they're continuing to use the funds, but following after the 3-month period for documentation requirements, the case managers will consider that. And the only limit to that consideration is the end of December 2020.
Okay. So we're targeting, what would we say, March, April?
March, April, and May.
Okay, March, April.
But we're not saying that expenditures incurred after May will not be eligible. We're looking for, as soon as the grant award is provided to the business, that within 3 months after that date, they're required to submit documentation back to the county to support how they use the funds. So in a manner of speaking, they could incur expenditures in June, July, and August. So it's kind of a moving window, but if they're going to go beyond that 3-month period of documentation requirement, then we will have to involve a case manager to review the circumstances of the applicant so that we can say, okay, it's okay if we extend this. What you use the funds for is more than eligible. You haven't exhausted the 10,000 that was provided to you. And we set a new range based on the information they provide.
Hey, Ed, could you comment also on the FICO score? We had a long discussion as part of the lead up to this grant program about making sure we kept business information confidential. The financials were replaced by a third-party FICO score process. So applicants shouldn't be worried necessarily about their personal data being in the hands of a governmental entity subject to open records. So I just want to make that clear that your information should be kept. I don't know how you're going to do it, Ed. You might describe it, but it's not going to be subject to other competitors or other people looking at your information. That was a priority of the business committee group that put this together, and I think Ed and Spurgeon worked through that process, even with SBA help in terms of discussion. So
we're going to have a third-party underwriter that Spurgeon is working with now, and that third party will be the direct facilitator of the FICO report request. The actual receipt by the county, we really don't need the report. We don't need the score. We need confirmation from the third-party underwriter that it was received and this is a business in good standing, because we don't even want to have to scrutinize different levels of scores. This was more intended, and it was based on the information we received from the group that did the federal EIDL loan program, that they use this to mitigate fraud with the application process. And going through a FICO report process mitigated the risk of that greatly. And for that reason, we felt that receiving financials, receiving tax returns was not necessary. That's the information we were most concerned with as being discoverable through an open records request. We would prefer not to have it and have it challenged. So that's why we moved to the FICO report through a third-party underwriter. Did I miss anything, Spurgeon?
No, that's correct. And it's important to note that that report will be basically a snapshot of the entity in question. As Ed said, it's not to set a yay or nay decision point. It's actually for information purposes, to prevent fraud. But it's important that no matter what you do, what information you submit, that you're just truthful and honest, because we will have the ability to go and check things periodically if there is something in question. But it's basically a simple barometer to make sure the business is healthy. It's been in business and there are no other discrepancies, but that limits our ability to show financials and tax returns. And we think this is the most appropriate way to move this program forward too in the time we have.
And guys, you would strongly suggest that the applicants use that the story portion of the application to actually tell their story. Tell you what's going on.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And understand that could result in follow-up questions, and we're ready to field those questions as they come across.
And again, that application is, you can reach that from the landing page right at Fort Bend County's landing page. Is that correct?
What you're going to experience is a cycling between 3 web pages starting Monday morning. We still have our page for the rent, mortgage, utility assistance, and we have the Census Bureau activity. And now there will be a third one that it cycles through, and you will see the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program. And you will click on the link, it'll take you to the application and everything else you need to know.
Okay. Do we have any more questions we need to address now? This is, If not, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Sturdivant, for the great discussion. We're excited to have this program off and running for the business community. I want to thank everyone for attending and learning about the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program. This recording, this webinar is going to be on the Chamber website within 48 hours under the Government Division tab. I do appreciate everyone for showing up, all of the chambers and the EDC. We do appreciate everyone working so hard for our businesses, for our community, and making this happen. Ed and Spurgeon, we really appreciate the hard work you guys have put in. I did say yesterday that I would let Jeff Wiley finish his compliment of Ed Sturdivant that he was cut off at Commissioner's Court.
I would be glad to, and Spurgeon too. Those guys, I know because I've called them on Saturdays. I've called them after 5. I've called them at 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. They're still at their desk working. So I know since we started both, they had the lucky opportunity to participate in not only the business grant program, but the rent assistance program. So they have been nonstop 7x24 for a number of weeks, let's just say that. And without their diligence and comprehensive knowledge and capability, we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are today. So thank you, gentlemen.
Very welcome.
And I want to thank the chambers too, because while I was the only business representative on the CARES committee, they all participated. Every chamber and every economic development director from the cities that we have, all, and the mayors, many small town mayors, were all involved in the development of this process and flowed information and content to be able to structure this. And so this is a collaborative effort, as it always has been at Fort Bend County, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, once again for attending. Thanks to all the EDCs and the chambers for all your work from Fort Bend County. This is us signing out. Have a great day.